When these men were out on a walk, they stumbled on a helpless dog in the middle of a snow-covered field. But when they moved closer to help it, they screamed when they saw what was going on. It was cold and almost time for Alexei and Ivan to head back home. The two roommates had decided to go to the park for a walk, but they soon realized that they were the only ones brave enough to be out in the cold, and they were about to freeze. As they made their way back home, Alexei and Ivan heard a noise coming from behind one of the trees. It was faint, and if they weren't the only ones in the park, no one would have heard it. While they contemplated what it was, the sound came again. Ivan spent most of his free time volunteering at animal shelters, and even though he had not seen the source of the noise, he could tell that it was coming from a dog. But what is a dog doing out in this weather? They wondered if something bad had happened to its owner, and it was stranded and left to survive. When Ivan and Alexei heard the sound again, they slowly made their way towards the tree, determined not to frighten it. As they got closer, they noticed a small figure curled tightly, almost like a ball. It was shivering intensely, and snow had covered most of its fur. As Alexei and Ivan continued to draw closer, the dog noticed their footsteps, but it made no attempt to find out who was approaching. It had no energy left to do anything and was just waiting for its time to come. The men walked around the animal until they were standing directly in front of it, yet it did not respond to them. Alexei knelt down in front of the dog and raised its face up. What he saw was heartbreaking. The dog wasn't opening its eyes, and there was no visible eye movement. Even worse, it wasn't moving at all. Ivan tried to rouse it up and get it to open its eyes, but nothing happened. Its body was almost completely frozen, and the poor thing was almost skin and bones. It wasn't just a dog stranded in the cold weather, it was also a stray who had probably suffered the winter weather for days. Although they had not seen it before, they noticed a small figure right beside the dog. It was curled up tightly beside the dog, its face buried in the dog's fur. Alexei went closer to turn the figure over, and both men screamed when they saw what it really was. "Hey, are you okay?" Alexei asked as he touched the body of a little girl, but he got no response. Alexei immediately removed his scarf and wrapped it around her and carried it gently in his arms. Ivan did the same and placed the dog in his arms. It was heavy and still limp. The girl's body was terribly cold, and she was unconscious and oblivious to what was happening. She couldn't be older than 10. Alexei and Ivan wondered if there was anything they could do, but neither of them were experts in healthcare. They knew that both the dog and the girl needed urgent help, and if that was going to happen, then they needed to split up. Alexei hurriedly dialed the emergency number, and Ivan began reaching out to all the vets he knew. At this time of the year, most of the vets were still closed for the holidays and there weren't many animal shelters open at the moment, but they had to try. Within 30 minutes, the ambulance arrived and Alexei followed it to the hospital, encouraging the girl to hold on. Ivan decided to give it one last try and called a non-profit pet project that he had heard about. Luckily, there was still someone in the office to attend to his call, and Ivan quickly gave the address and the situation that was going on. When he was done, the staff thanked him for finding the dog on time and asked him if he could make it to the shelter. When he arrived, the vet was already available to attend to the dog. It had a few minor injuries, but other than that, it was going to survive despite the harsh weather. Alexei had already arrived in the hospital with the little girl, and she was immediately rushed into one of the hospital units. She was wearing thin gloves, a winter jacket and boots, but being out in the cold for so long had rendered her body almost stiff. She was unresponsive to stimuli, and her face was pale, a sign of how long she had been out in the cold. She had a body temperature close to 25 degrees Celsius, 10 degrees below the normal temperature of a healthy person, and her heart was beating once every few seconds. The nurses and doctors immediately got to work trying to bring her body temperature back to normal. They got heated blankets to warm her up, she was attached to a respirator and it was confirmed that her kidney, liver, intestine, and lungs were still working normally. The doctors also used special devices to help pump blood throughout her body in order to keep vital organs warm. The nurses took off her clothes and replaced them with fresh warm clothes. Ivan had joined Alexei and the two of them stayed trying to get as much as they could, but the staff asked them to go home. Since she was a minor, the hospital could only release delicate information about her situation to her parents. All the doctor could tell them was that she was out of danger. Although there was a long road to recovery ahead, the girl was going to survive no matter what. And that was all thanks to the brave dog who had curled up next to her and kept her warm during the storm. A wave of relief washed over Alexei and Ivan when they heard the news. They wondered how long she had been out there and how exactly it had gotten there in the first place. But now none of that mattered. All they cared about was receiving even better news tomorrow as they made their way home for the night. The next morning, Alexei and Ivan went to the police department looking for news about a missing girl. They described her features and the place where they had found her in the hospital she was in. They wanted to know if there was someone looking for her. Thankfully, the police confirmed that someone had filed a missing persons report, and her family had been searching for her for a whole day. They had been alerted a few minutes before and would be at the hospital soon. Alexei and Ivan decided to go to the hospital as well. Because of the girl's condition, a doctor had stayed overnight to check on her and make sure nothing happened. But throughout the night, the girl had suffered multiple seizures that had been caused by extreme hypothermia, and it had been a challenge to work through that, but as morning came, the worst was over. Even though she had not opened her eyes yet, her temperature was stable and the doctors expected that she would be ready to talk and even go home by the end of the day. But there was something more that the doctor wanted Alexei and Ivan to know. As a special favor for finding her, they were going to grant them only one visit to see the girl, and after that, they would have to wait for the child's parents to approve any further meetings. Alexei and Ivan thanked the doctor and walked into her room to see how she was doing. But to their surprise, she was already awake. She was looking around the room with confusion written all over her face. She was still too weak to move, but she showed signs of struggle as she tried to climb off the bed. The nurse that had brought them in immediately alerted the doctor, and Alexei and Ivan were asked to leave the room. While they waited outside to see if they could pry more news from a kind nurse, they noticed someone rushing into the hospital. "Where is Vika? Where is my daughter?" a woman shouted. Her face was twisted with worry, and even the person that had come in with her was finding it difficult to calm her down. One of the nurses led her away until she disappeared from their sight. When the nurse returned back, Ivan approached to ask what was going on. The woman that arrived was the young girl's mother. She had just received news about her daughter and was there to look after her. Seeing her mother in a sea of unfamiliar faces had calmed the girl down. She was now receiving more treatment from the doctor. Now that they knew there was someone here to look after her, neither Alexei nor Ivan saw the need to stay for much longer. They had done all they could do. The nurse asked them to leave a number just in case and then they left, returning back to their home. 2 days later, Alexei and Ivan received an unexpected call. It was the mother of the girl they had rescued. She requested to see them in person and thank them for what they had done for her daughter. They agreed to meet at a cafe close to the park and recount their experience. When they arrived, they discovered that it wasn't just the mother that had come to see them. The little girl was there too. Her name was Vika and she was 10 years old. She looked completely different from the last time they saw her. Her mother greeted them with a smile and immediately thanked them for saving her daughter. She introduced herself as Tatiana and told them what had happened. Vika had gotten lost on her way back home from school. Since her home wasn't too far from the school and the neighborhood was safe, most times she returned home by herself. But that day, something happened. There was a frigid blizzard and the snow grew almost 2 feet deep, making it difficult for her to walk. There were also drifts blocking the first floor of buildings. Eventually, the weather got worse and it was almost impossible for her to see anything in the falling snow as she tried to return home. She was scared and frightened. Her first call was to find somewhere safe to weather the harsh winter, but as she stumbled around, she moved farther away from home without knowing. She was also growing increasingly cold the more time she spent outside and started finding it difficult to remain on her feet. Before she knew it, she fell to the ground, and the next thing she saw was 2 men with her in a hospital room. Her mom had searched for her around the neighborhood for a whole day but couldn't find her. Because of the weather, no one had seen her and even the street cameras were unable to capture any footage that could tell them where she had gone. Vika's mom also had a lot of questions to ask. Alexei told her where they had found her daughter along with the dog that had saved her life. If the dog wasn't there to keep her warm, then there was no telling how bad the situation would have gotten. They confirmed that the dog was still with the vet, but it had already recovered. The only thing left was to make sure that it got adopted into the right family. Thankfully, Alexei and Ivan had told the vet what happened, and he had relayed the story to the animal shelter. So, after posting about the dog and its story on social media, the shelter had gotten a lot of requests from people wanting to adopt her. The shelter couldn't find any indication of where the dog had come from, but they were almost certain that she had been abandoned. The dog had been trained and was well aware of how to behave around humans. So, this time around, they were being extra careful to make sure that the dog was placed in the right environment with people that would never abandon it. The shelter had narrowed it down to 2 families and would begin the adoption process soon. But Vika's mother had something else in mind just as the shelter was contemplating the adoptive process. This was the dog that had saved her daughter's life, and apart from Alexei and Ivan, there was no one she was more grateful to. Apart from keeping Vika warm, the young girl had told the mother how the dog had comforted her when she was frightened. Because of its presence, she wasn't completely alone. She had asked about the dog when she left the hospital and requested to see it if she could. Although they knew the shelter would take proper care during the adoption process, there was always going to be uncertainty about how the dog would be treated. And the last thing any of them wanted was for the dog to end back on the streets helpless. So they hoped they could adopt the pup themselves. This was going to be their first pet, but there couldn't be a better choice. What Vika and her mom were sure of was that they both loved the dog and would do anything to make sure that it had the environment it needed to thrive. Ivan gave them the contact of the shelter. They reached out, and the shelter was elated to receive the news and accepted their offer to adopt the dog. It took weeks for the adoption process to be completed, and the shelter also gave the family tips on how to care for the dog, especially as first-time owners. To their surprise, the dog was still able to recognize Vika when they came to pick it up. It responded affectionately to her touch and made the little girl more excited to take it home. Vika's mother bent down to pet the dog affectionately as they led it to the car and thanked the dog for saving her daughter. When they arrived back home, the dog was taken to the corner of the house that had been set aside for it. Vika's mom had bought new dog toys along with a list of things that the dog had grown fond of in the shelter. Now that it was with them, Vika decided to call the dog Mutig. In spite of their doubts, the dog seamlessly adapted to his new family and its personality continued to shine through. Vika and her mom often took Mutig for walks in the park. To their surprise, he made a friend and the two would always play together in the park. Having Mutig in their life was an unexpected blessing and they were thankful for the circumstances that brought them together. What an incredible story. Would you have picked up a strange dog if you noticed it wasn't breathing? How would you have reacted to seeing a little girl curled up to its body? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.